welcome to the Crafty Mini, and in this one we're going to be looking at my ORK SKIN recipe that I use a lot of the time. I just think it makes the ORK SKIN pop a little bit more, and just gives it a really cool little overall finish when it's done, with, especially with the highlights. One of the nice things about painting orcs is there's heavy musculature, as a lot of the torso and the arms tend to show on the sculpts, whether it's GW or third-party stuff. This particular one I got from Etsy. It's a 3D print, but you can see it's in the style of that 40k orc, and he's got a big span. He's look like an alternate version of like an orc mech, but a bit more simple, less of the big armour and things that you see normally in like the 40k stuff. But yeah, so just base coated black to start with, and then I go on with I'm using Pro Acryl purely on this range, and it's just Pro Acryl green. It's quite a bright, vibrant green to start with, but then we'll actually desaturate that later on when we come to start adding in the extra colours for the highlights, and you'll see how the skin progresses. So when it first goes on, it's quite garish, but it's a case of trusting the process. This is something I've done with the orcs for years. Settled on this sort of way of highlighting the skin, and as I say, just making it a bit more desaturated. Right, so you'll see on the camera here that I'm on the wet palette, I'm mixing in a little bit of Pro Acryl's golden brown. This is more of like an orangey ochre sort of colour, and this is where that desaturation starts as you mix it in with that green. The initial green base coat's a little bit patchy in areas. I put on quite a thin layer. I'm not too bothered about the overall opacity, because the extra highlights that we're going to start adding on will build on this. Now, one thing to note, when you first put these first few layers on, it goes on really bright and it looks like a complete stark contrast with the base green, but as it dries, it does dry a lot more subtle and just takes the vibrancy out of that initial green as well. And all I'm doing, you can see, is just concentrating on all the muscles. Any orc sculpts tend to have something like this, where they've got really oversized muscles, you know, biceps, triceps and stuff, and just picking out those areas, and then I'm going up to pretty much the edge of every single muscle group, leaving the initial green just in those little really harsh cut sort of sculpt lines in the arms and things. And you'll see me going around and just building up these layers, and then with each section you'll see we're adding more of that golden brown in, and then eventually a third colour, just to make those highlights pop a little bit more. Right, so now that initial coat's dried, I've added a little bit more of the yellow, only a tiny bit more now, so it's roughly 1 part of the initial green to 2 parts yellow. And I'm going in now and picking out the muscles individually again. This time I'm not covering the whole of the previous layer, so we are going to get a slight transition up. Again, this is extremely sort of green in its vibrancy, but this will be toned down in the last few steps. This is also a really good way of just getting yourself used to brush control, and especially any sort of heavily muscular miniature with a lot of flesh showing, because they're more organic shapes, they're easier to follow. Yeah, because of like where you want your light source from, it's easier to highlight and pick out those specular highlights on the miniature as well. It's a really good way of building up your muscle memory and teaching yourself how to paint certain areas. The main thing is, whenever you progress to the next bright layer, is just basically don't cover everything that you've just done, and that's purely because you want a gradient to show up on the miniature, which you'll see on the final shots. Right, so at this point we're on the first sort of real highlight layer now, and this is where it's an equal mix, so it's roughly 2 to 2. I might put a little bit more of the golden brown in there for the really high edge highlights around the mouth and the face in particular, because I want that as the focal point. But you can see here again, I'm going over all those little areas, When it comes to the arms and the back and the muscles and things, again, I'm not covering as much from the previous layer, so they're still a bit showing, and it just gives that nice gradient. And because the golden brown is working its way through each layer, you get this really nice pull and this nice sort of soft variation in colour from the initial green right the way up to what's going to be the ultimate final highlight. And it's just little bits at a time, taking my time picking out. And on the actual sculpt, the shoulders in particular, there's these really harsh straight lines of muscles, so I'm picking out the curvature of those, and basically where the top of the curve would be, that's pointing upwards, which would catch the most light, that's where the majority of this paint's going to go. And it's because that'll be the highest point to pick out all of the little tones and the little extra shapes of the muscle that would actually pick up more light as you're going around the model. And then for me, just to boost the green a little bit more, is I take a little bit of Military Shades by Army Painter, I mix it roughly 2 to 1 with water, and put a very very thin glaze over the miniature. And this just basically brings all those little layers in together, because there will be some where brush strokes and things where I've maybe not got it quite right, but this basically marries everything together, puts a nice green tint on everything. And the nice thing with this as well, if you do feel like you've gone a bit overboard with the green sort of glaze wash that's going on now, is you basically just go back to your original colours on the palette and just punch those highlights again as well. And that is pretty much my go-to for an orc sort of tabletop ready skin colour tone. I find it really pops, it works well, and again, because of the nature and the way these orcs are sculpted, because of the heavy musculature, the big jaw, the pointy ears and everything, there's some really nice sharp details that you can pick out and make the colour contrast sort of pop a little bit more. It's one of my favourite races to paint, is the orc. They're always fun, they're very expressive, they've got great sort of personality with the sculpts as well, not very static, and you can really go to town with the colour. But this idea of the green skin, and instead of just going up in lighter greens, is adding that yellow colour, the golden brown in this case, just because it'll brighten the colours, so you can build up your transitional layers into the highlights and things. But because it's yellow, it desaturates that green a little bit more, and it just gives a little bit more visual interest to the actual miniature in the end. And here he is in the final shot. So in terms of all the little bits like the trousers and things, just painting the usual way I've done in other videos on the channel. The main thing as well, it works the same way as that unifying green wash that I put on the skin, is everything gets a nice varnish as well, just brings everything down. The only difference being is the skin will get a satin varnish, whereas all the leather straps and things like that and the helmet, they'll all get a matte varnish instead. But you can see here with the close-ups that you've got a really nice variation from that initial base green, which was quite garish and really over the top, and then it desaturates and you get to those yellow highlights. And just picking out all those little details, which on a sculpt like this, like all orcs that I've seen, as I say, from GW to third party, because of the way the orc is, it's a really nice and easy miniature to paint, and it's a good way of getting you used to your brush control. Thank you very much for watching. I hope you enjoyed that. That's my way of doing an orc skin, and we'll see you all on the next one, where we've got a bit of an interesting one. It's painting using AI, sort of.